At its core, Celeste is an exceptional platformer, interweaving elements from games such as Super Meat Boy and the Super Mario series, whilst providing its own fresh approach. It has cozy and welcoming visuals, killer music that evolves within each level, and has established a dedicated speedrunning community. It's also a game with a deep and intimate story on the subject of mental health. The essentials provide a tale anyone can relate to. Madeline, the game's protagonist, decides to climb Celeste Mountain. Along the way, she learns a lot about herself, meets others on similar journeys, and learns to overcome personal challenges in her way, alongside the whole super stressy platforming thing. The mountain is an analogy. Climbing Celeste Mountain translates to overcoming personal challenges in your own life. Go figure. If you haven't played Celeste already, I really encourage you to give it a go. It probably takes about 3 to 8 hours to complete the core missions, and there are a few ways to ease up the difficulty if you're just interested in exploring the story. But much like how there is so much more to the gameplay through the alternative versions of the levels, the story also has a lot more to tell. Alongside the central narrative, there are explorations of anxiety, depression, uncertainty, and being unable to move on, to name just a few. This and subsequent videos are a chance to explore 3 particular stories within Celeste. Madeline confronting her own mental health, Theo and the pressures of finding purpose in life, and Mr. Ishiro's relationship with the past and the inability of escaping it. Before going any further, we should probably get some disclaimers out of the way. The most obvious is that to explore these themes properly, we are going to be spoiling the entire central story. I will also be looking to go as in-depth as I can with these topics, so there will be a presumption on you, the viewer, that you have played the game beforehand. Although if you aren't looking to play the game, you will likely still find these narratives interesting. Hopefully. Also, be aware that we'll be talking about depression and anxiety in relation to the characters in detail, so the content may be uncomfortable for some viewers. Finally, it's important to remember that whilst mental health is universal, how we experience and process mental health is individual to us. I do not claim to be an expert on mental health. I have supported charities and worked with groups/experts in this area, but I don't have direct credentials on the topic. Also, due to this, your interpretation of the story might be quite different to me, and will unsurprisingly be influenced by our own struggles with mental health. So please bear that in mind. With all of that said, let's get into our first story with Madeline. So, what do we know about Madeline? She's in her mid-20s, work might be fine, but she lives deep inside her own head, and feels trapped in an endless cycle. Madeline overthinks, mostly about things far gone in the past, and relies on drinking and arguing in the internet as outlets. She's come to Celeste Mountain for... what, exactly? Well, to prove a point to herself, that she can do something that she's put her mind to. After all, in her words, it's all or nothing. Proving herself wrong through force of will is the key narrative thread for Madeline. What she's looking to defeat is represented in Madeline, the physical manifestation of her uncertainty, cautiousness, anger, and sadness. Madeline is here to push through that part of herself, to break that cycle. We learn all of this through a quite late conversation between Madeline and fellow climber Theo. It helps provide an understanding as to where Madeline finds herself in her life, and assists us in making sense of the previous chapters with this context. Her initial conversations with Theo and the old lady are light on details for herself, but heavy on her adamance to climb the mountain. We see that these two characters quickly clock on that Madeline is attempting to ignore Madeline, and to some extent, does not feel able to open up about how she feels. Later on, the old lady notes that she hasn't met anyone so angry with themselves, and that if Madeline succeeded, it would be due to spiting herself rather than anything else. Madeline is constantly putting on a mask to the pressure she is feeling, and that might likely translate into this bold determination when initially talking to others. These first conversations with the reserved but confident Madeline are contrasted with her experiences with Madeline. Starting in the ruins within Chapter 2, where Madeline is released by the power of the mountain, Madeline is grossed out by what she sees. Madeline refuses to acknowledge the situation that Madeline, i.e. the physical representation of her anxiety, presents. Isn't she out of her depth? Is she really a mountain climber? Madeline proactively decides to run away from these conversations, creating the subsequent chase sequence. This all culminates in Madeline having an anxiety attack, and at a phone booth resorting to speaking to who we can presume is her ex. Whilst it's only a couple of sentences of dialogue, there is quite a lot of reading between the lines that you can do here. Madeline is challenged for claiming that she feels in danger, that she is making up the experience she just went through to get attention. Madeline responds to her ex by saying that they always do this, which suggests the two have a lot of history. The ex relents, but the tone is quite condescending and turns Madeline into someone who's been given permission to discuss her anxiety, rather than being seen as an equal person in the situation. Finally, upon realising the whole thing was a dream, the ex says, "Of course it is. We haven't spoken in months. Why would we start now?" This is the only clear example we're provided in the game of something in Madeline's past that regularly comes back to haunt her. My view is that, when struggling with her mental health, Madeline wants to reconnect with her ex. However, for reasons we can't be sure of, their relationship didn't work out. We can guess that it seems due to the ex being unresponsive or negative of Madeline's anxiety and mental health problems at the very least. However, what we see here is one of those cycles Madeline spoke about before. Madeline encounters an issue that flares up her anxiety. She has a panic attack and in response returns to her past, i.e. her ex. This creates another negative reaction, and for what we can see, this is something her mind brings up to Madeline regularly, again and again. That's got to be exhausting mentally. What's even more interesting is that Madeline soon runs into Theo, but does not discuss anything of what she just went through. The mask is firmly back in place. Yes, she does talk to her mum, which shows that she has someone to support her, but through Madeline's own admission, her mum is not completely aware of how Madeline truly feels. So, based on her later conversations and first chapters, we know that Madeline does struggle with mental health, finds it hard to open up to others, and that her anxiety often manifests as panic attacks. We also know that she sees all of this as something separate to who she actually is. This is why the chapter based within the temple can be seen almost as something separate, and a situation that creates a whole lot of tension and fear. We learn that the temple increases the intensity of the experiences created on the mountain, but that it all still comes from within the person who visits it. So essentially, something quite similar to going to Silent Hill. The temple is a manifestation of your worst fears and issues. As Madeline searches for Theo and is sent to the other world within the temple, we are provided an insight into potentially how worrying Madeline's mental health state can become. Madeline is a part of this world, but she is but one part of a larger whole. The temple is an eerie red. Diamonds stick out from every corner, and tentacles block large segments of the floor space. The music has shifted from a previously relaxing but eerie tone to one that is shrill, aggressive, and loud. Madeline is confused and terrified as to why her mind would be creating this, and according to Madeline, this is what she deserves. The most terrifying part of all, however, are the statues, which turn into hyper-aggressive monsters. We actually move one of these monsters directly into Madeline as a game mechanic, killing her. What does this all mean? Well, up until now, we've been led to believe that whilst Madeline does struggle with mental health, it could be seen as quite low to mid-level anxiety and uncertainty. What the temple reveals is just how much Madeline's mental state can deteriorate due to what she is going through. Madeline saying Madeline deserves this is essentially her own brain telling her that the way the temple looks, or in other words, how her mind feels, is deserved, and that she should not aspire to feel any better. The monsters can represent Madeline's own mind fighting against her, preventing her from being able to live her life and directly trying to ruin it. Those who have suffered from depression for any reason will likely relate to this feeling: the inability to get out of bed, being perceived as a failure, or feeling worthless. It's genuinely terrifying stuff, and almost all of this is implied rather than told to us. When finally escaping the temple, we come back to that conversation thread between Madeline and Theo, where Madeline is finally able to open up about how she feels, talking about Madeline and even what it's like in her eyes to go through depression. However, what's interesting here is that whilst clearly feeling more positive, Madeline is simply reinforcing her original view that Madeline, her anxiety, and depression can be left behind. Theo does challenge this, similarly to the old lady, but Madeline bats it out of hand. Madeline then confronts Madeline, saying that they need to talk. However, in a parallel almost similar to how her ex treated Madeline, Madeline simply says that she is going to let Madeline go, leave her on the mountain, and that they'll both be happier for it. Madeline's reaction shows just how much Madeline's mind revolts against this idea. You can't simply leave your depression and anxiety behind, or ignore your mental health. As Madeline says, "You think you're above me." There's a couple of things to take away from this exchange. The obvious one is that ignoring your mental health and thinking that you can shove it into a corner will likely never work. You can't run away from your mental health. It's always a part of you. The other, as seen through Madeline trying to control her breathing through the golden feather technique, is that sometimes we're going to experience things that no matter how prepared we are, they're going to throw you to the ground. A bit like the temple, this shows that whilst we can take control of our anxiety or day-to-day concerns, we may also experience moments that cast us all the way back to square one, and that we need to acknowledge that and move forward. It doesn't matter how happy we are for one day, 1 week, or a year. Mental health is not something that can be planned for completely, and sometimes we can be at our highest point when it causes us problems. The lesson Madeline and we ourselves learn by going through all of this is that sometimes the first step to improving your mental health is being able to sit down and listen to yourself. And that can really be the hardest part, as it involves being honest with ourselves about how we feel. To admit that something is wrong, no matter how big or small, and to confront it head on. The truth is painful, and mental health isn't simple, as seen through Madeline, who goes through a hell of a lot to get to this point. After this, the game doesn't unpack Madeline/Madeline's relationship much, but it doesn't really have to. Madeline listens to herself, metaphorically levels up, and climbs Celeste Mountain. For me, Madeline's character arc is completed when she recognises that Madeline is a part of her. The last line of interest comes on the top of the mountain itself, where Madeline states that things can't go back to how they were before the mountain, which essentially means that now we have confronted things, we can't go back to ignoring these issues. By acknowledging this, Madeline is able to develop herself as a person, and perhaps to start to move on from the past that haunts her. Thank you for listening. I hope you found this interesting, and I will hopefully be working on the other two stories within Celeste in the near future. Have a great day.